I hope you're staying healthy as well as productive. My name is Lewis Thompson. I'm a senior editor here at National Geographic Learning, and it's a pleasure to see so many of you tuning in from all over the world. I took a look at the chat, and we truly are a global community this morning, or today, this evening, wherever you are in the world. So I'm joined today by someone who needs no introduction to those of you familiar with National Geographic Learning. But to add to that wonderful introduction just from Emily, he is also the author of the new upper level of WorldLink, and coming to you direct from Oxford in the UK, it's John Hughes. Hi, John.
Hi there. Thank you, Lewis. Hello, everyone. Quite a few names I recognise, so nice to see you. Thank you for coming. But I'll be speaking to you later. Lewis is going to kick things off.
That's great. So we're going to split our session today into 3 parts. We're going to start with an overview of the WorldLink program. WorldLink is now in its 4th edition, and I'm going to give you all a brief introduction to why it is still one of the most successful 4-skill programs out there. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about our publishing process. I'll explain the steps we took to make this edition, the 4th edition of WorldLink, the best yet. After that, I'm going to hand it over to John, who's going to introduce you to the new edition. But before all of that, we're going to take a quick poll. We would love to hear how familiar you are with WorldLink. Some of you joining us today may be longtime users of the program. Some of you may never have used the program at all. So please select your answers and we'll see what we're dealing with. Okay, and we'll give you a few more seconds here. And Emily, I'm unable to see the results right now. Or are they going to pop up once we close this poll?
They will. Right now, we have about 7% of people are very familiar. 10 have seen it or are considering using it, 10%. 71 are unfamiliar with the series.
Okay.
And yeah, I'll share it in 1 second.
Wonderful. Okay, so I see the majority of the folks joining us today are unfamiliar with WorldLink and would like to learn more about this series. Well, that's great. For those of you who are familiar with the series, this session will introduce you to the new features. And for those of you who have used it in the past or no longer use it, or those of you who have never used WorldLink, which seems to be a large percentage of you, we'll be going over some of the sustaining features that have pulled WorldLink into a 4th edition and made this program so successful. So there's something for everyone. We have set aside some time for questions at the end of the session, but if you do have any burning questions that just can't wait, do feel free to post them in the chat and the team will try their best to answer them. So let's get started. Excuse me. Okay. What is WorldLink? Well, WorldLink is a 5-level integrated skills program for beginner to upper intermediate English learners. If you align your curriculum to the CEFR, the intro level for WorldLink starts around A1, and the final level, level 4, brand new to this edition, tops out at B2. So how did we get here? How did we arrive at a 4th edition? We must have been doing something right. So let me explain what has made WorldLink so successful. The notion of confident communication is central to WorldLink. We empower students to communicate confidently, and we do that in 4 main ways. WorldLink is an integrated skills series that places an emphasis on spoken English. Now, this emphasis isn't to the detriment of the other skills. In fact, what's made WorldLink so successful is its ability to help students develop all 4 skills while maintaining a strong focus on those interactions that occur organically in the language classroom. We all know that topics with which students have a close association and topics that they find interesting are key to enable them to communicate. WorldLink has been incredibly successful at giving students opportunities to share lived experiences and make language personal. We also know that vocabulary and grammar that is leveled appropriately makes language accessible. WorldLink has had great success in giving students the tools they need to develop as lifelong language learners beyond the book. And we all know that learning doesn't stop at the end of class. And finally, using language in real-world contexts shows how it can be applied in students' lives outside of the classroom. And WorldLink is famous for its fun and robust video program and authentic National Geographic content. Now, all of these are great, but how do we keep the WorldLink experience current and, more importantly, even more effective, ensuring that we meet these 4 factors as much as possible? Well, we engage in research and development. At the start of our development process, the first step is to gather the feedback. It's important for us to know what we're doing well. And while we love to hear that, we also, more importantly, want to know what we could be doing better. We administer surveys and hold advisory panels to gather as much information as possible before we even start working on new content. This feedback informs our development, and we stay in touch with people who provide feedback in these early stages to show them how development is going. And I'm pleased to see plenty of people who are involved in these early stages here with us today. It takes a village, and none of this would be possible without your valued input. So thank you all. Now, with respect to WorldLink, there were 3 key takeaways that resonated within our early feedback. Let me share with you some quotes that exemplify these. The series needs a more obvious connection between lessons in a unit. Some of the videos are outdated. Students are used to more recent and relatable content. We need more interactive group activities and task-based projects. I should point out these are comments that we had on previous editions of WorldLink, whether that be the 3rd edition. I did see some attendees have been using WorldLink from the 1st edition, so they may be using the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd edition. Now, feedback such as this led to our 3 key takeaways for development. Let me show you what they are. Each unit of WorldLink is split into 2 lessons, Lesson A, Lesson B. Both lessons explore the same topic, but one common theme in the feedback was that the transition between these lessons in some units could have been better. We knew that we needed to make changes to the content, but we also knew that we needed to signpost real-world and relevant language goals to show progression and achievement. In addition, we needed to rethink how students apply and assess their language goals at the end of each unit. As mentioned, the WorldLink video program is incredibly popular, but it was starting to feel a little dated. One of the pitfalls of working with authentic content with real-world video is that it doesn't always age well. It needs to move with the times, and this is something we heard in our feedback. However, instead of just researching new videos that fit the various themes of WorldLink, we wanted to do something groundbreaking to build on the message of confident communication. Finally, something else we heard in our feedback, and you saw the quote, was the desire to give students opportunities to engage in project-based tasks that allowed them to further communicate in a way that wasn't necessarily controlled by the curriculum. Additionally, we wanted to give students the opportunity to choose how they did these tasks. So, with those key findings in mind, I'm going to hand things over to John, who's going to walk you through some of the new features of the 4th edition of WorldLink.
Okay, thanks very much, Lewis, for introducing the series and also highlighting the way the research took place for the 4th edition and the kind of feedback we were receiving. We were really pleased with so much positive feedback that we also wanted to respond to the areas that people felt that we could work on. So what I'm going to do is walk you through some of the new features and give you the perspective from somebody who's been writing the material for the new WorldLink series. And I'm going to focus on 3 particular features. One key feature, the can-do language goals. You might have come to another webinar I did some time back looking at goals and the idea of can-do goals and backward planning. Well, I've applied that again in the approach to the goals in WorldLink 4th edition. So I'll talk about those in a minute. And also I want to talk about a particular new feature in the 4th edition, which is the active English page. And every unit has 2 active English pages where we try to build more communication and make the students more confident with communication. So we're going to look at those in a minute. Lewis also mentioned the strength of the WorldLink series in terms of video, and in previous editions, WorldLink's always been very well known because it's always had a video in every unit. But we thought with the 4th edition, we'd go a step further and have 2 videos in every unit. So this is very much a video course. It has the opportunity to work with video a lot and really kind of excite your students with different types of video. So we're going to look at that in a little moment. And there's also part of the feedback was the idea that we needed more recycling, more opportunity for students to review the content and try to use their English in authentic context, and also within the context of project work and more choice. So we've added a new feature to the 4th edition called the Real World Link, and I'll talk about the methodology behind that in a few moments. Let's start off with the can-do language goals. Okay, so what I've got here for you is the opening pages from a unit of WorldLink. It's unit 2, it's called the working week. It's to introduce students to some of the vocabulary they'll need for talking about the world of work, either because they're young adults or older teenagers who haven't started working yet, but will need the English in order to do that. Now, I want you to draw your attention to the screen. You can see there the goals bar. At the bottom of the opening part of the unit, there's a bar that says goals, lesson A, lesson B. And I've just made it larger for you on the screen there. Now, as Lewis said, each unit has 2 lessons. So the goals in lesson A are to get the students talking about work-life balance, to use the vocabulary for talking about work, and also to take part in a meeting. There's a big focus on speaking in lesson A in every unit. So we take a functional area of speaking, and in this part it's to take part in a meeting. And then lesson B in this unit is to identify skills and personal qualities, and then to ask and answer interview questions. So students basically go through the process of what it would take to apply for a job. So it's really helping them with their future skills in the context of English. But the important point to notice is the use of goals. Now, some of the feedback from the research was that the lessons need to be more interconnected, that the language aims clearly needed to be leading to a final goal. So what we did here, we took a backward planning, backward design approach. And that is where you say to yourself, okay, by the end of the lesson in the unit, we want the students to have achieved certain things in English. So in this case, in lesson A, we want them to be able to talk about work and life balance. And we also want them to be able to use the language to take parts in meeting. And then you think to yourself, okay, what are the goals and the aims that you need to have within the unit in order to help them achieve that? And through doing that, you get a clear connection between each part of the lesson. It's like how you might to plan an effective lesson plan. You decide what the final goals or aims of your plan are, and then you work backwards and decide what you need to provide as a teacher in order to achieve that. And we've done that much more clearly, I think, in the 4th edition of WorldLink than it was done before. And it links back to some of the feedback that we were getting. So let's take you through a lesson in the unit so you can see. Remember the goals in lesson A. are to talk about work-life balance and to take part in a meeting. So students would do a warm-up video. So I'll talk a little bit more about the warm-up video later. But then they turn the page, which I'm trying to do on the screen. There we go. You turn the page and you get the vocabulary page, and that introduces the vocabulary that students are going to need to talk about work-life balance. It gives them useful phrases, useful vocabulary. Then on the right-hand page, you always get a listening. So there's plenty of listening practice in the book, and students look at an issue related to work-life balance. And in this case, they're listening to a discussion about flexi-time and the advantages and disadvantages of organizing your own time and also working from home, working from work, which of course is very relevant at the moment because many of us are having to work from home and juggle family lives and so on. So it's made quite relevant to the current situation and get students talking about issues which are particularly relevant now. Then they turn to the page again, they get to the speaking page on the left-hand side, and the speaking page always has a speaking strategy and a set of useful expressions. So in this case, students are being taught the expressions they'll need for taking part in a meeting. So it's like a meeting, agreeing, disagreeing, giving their opinions and so on. So useful for work, but also for other contexts as well. But you can see how we're really providing the content to reflect the can-do goals at the beginning of the lesson. The grammar here is contrasting dynamic and stative verbs, so students can talk about their everyday life, their everyday work, what they're working on at the moment, what current projects they have, the kinds of things you know that you need to do with those dynamic and stative verbs just to describe your working life. And then finally, and this is the new feature, you get to the active English page. And you'll notice the active English page is something quite different usually. Now there's a variety. Throughout the book, there's a lot of consistency between pages. Grammar follows a certain methodology, vocabulary follows a certain methodology. But on the active English page, which comes at the end of the lesson, so you'll see it twice in a unit, it might be a board game like this, so students get into groups, they put a counter on the board and they go around the board and they practice all the language that's come up from the previous pages. So they'll be practicing vocabulary from the vocabulary section, speaking phrases, the grammar of dynamic and stative verbs. It's all recycling it. And then you notice the goal box at the bottom of the active English page. Those are the two goals that they saw at the beginning of the lesson in the unit, talking about work-life balance, taking part in a meeting, and students reflect on how well they did it. So they've played the board game, and then they reflect, am I able to talk about work-life balance? Yes, I can, mostly, not really. Can I take part in a meeting? They reflect on it, and then they have a think about what is it that they're lacking, or what is it that they did really well that made them achieve those goals? So we think by doing this, we've ensured that there's always an awareness of the can-do goals, and that throughout the lesson, there's a feeling of there's a specific direction that you're going in. And that's what I mean by this idea of backward planning. You think, what are the goals? Now let's work back, work out what the language is. Now let's teach that language and practice it, and then students self-assess themselves at the end. So we're really pleased with this new focus on goals, but also the active English pages. You might be looking at that, that's a board game. And if you teach online at the moment, don't worry, the teacher's book, the lesson planner book that goes with the student book that gives you suggestions and guidance, it includes lots of tips for teaching online lessons. I know because I wrote a lot of them, particularly for level 2 and level 4, but I've made suggestions on ways you can adapt the material if you need to, so it works, for example, in a Zoom lesson. So don't worry, it'll still work whether you're working face-to-face or online. But that's the first change, responding to the feedback. Okay. Just to sum up the main features then, there's signposted goals featuring can-do statements. There's communicative active English sections, which is recycling the language. And then the self-assessment and the goals of lesson A, lesson B. That's that first new feature of the book. Let's move on to the next new feature, video. As you probably, if you've used WorldLink before, you know that every unit has its own video. And usually the video in the 3rd edition came at the beginning of the unit. It was quite different from many other course books, because lots of other course books, the video always comes at the end. But WorldLink liked to kick off the unit with a video because it's kind of motivating, gets students interested. And one of the pieces of feedback we got in the user research was we needed to update the videos, but we also wanted more variety of video types. So let's take this unit as an example. This unit is called Once Upon a Time. It's obviously about storytelling, quite a lot of the unit. And in the warm-up videos, students watch a piece of an animated movie. Now, what's interesting about the animated movie, and you can see a picture of the older woman in the video at the top right-hand corner of the screen now. There's no language in it, it's all visual, it's all animation, but it visually tells a story and students have to watch it and it activates lots of language. So the aim of the warm-up video is to find out what students already know, to activate their schema, to get their mental processes thinking about the topic that they're about to look at in the unit, and to get students talking. And that's how we've used the warm-up video. So warm-up videos in the books are often very visual, they're often quite short, but they're there to motivate and engage students at the beginning of a lesson. And there's a whole variety, as I say, there's animation, there's news footage. The picture on the screen there comes from a news report from CBS, so a lot of it's authentic content. And of course, as you'd expect, there's some National Geographic documentary style videos. So the picture that you can see there comes from a video about volcanoes. So that's the video at the beginning of a unit. But now we have a new feature right at the end called the Global Voices feature. And this is brand new, never seen before video content, okay? And the idea behind it was that we would interview real people and we would challenge the students a bit. We would get them to have to listen a bit harder than the warm-up video, but they're listening to people being interviewed or people presenting information in some way. But all the language they're using, a lot of the language they're using is recycling language that's been taught in the unit, in the previous pages of the unit. So it's a way of recycling the language, but in a very authentic way, because the responses of the presenters are very authentic. So what kind of video? Well, the videos feature real speakers such as National Geographic explorers, their interviews with people in the streets. And one really nice feature that I like is that we interviewed real students. So actually some of the videos include students who are studying English. They have different levels of English. They're from different parts of the world, but they're talking about the types of things that your students will also talk about. And they're talking about the challenges that they face, perhaps learning a language, living in another country, cultural differences. So students will watch some of these videos and they'll think, oh yeah, that's what I would say. That's what I think. So there's a real sense of personalization in this video content. And you get a real mixture of different Englishes and different levels of proficiency. It recycles and demonstrates the unit's language goals, and it also encourages students to personalize and apply the language they hear, because what the speakers are talking about, you then ask the students to talk about something similar after they've watched the video. Now, what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you one of the videos. This is a guy called Alex Segrist, and he's talking about the topic of the internet and technology. But what I want to do is to give you a task here, and in the chat, while you're watching the video, as you're listening to the video, I want you to write what areas of language do you think were taught in the unit? Because Alex uses certain language structures that are taught in the unit, certain vocabulary. So as you're watching Alex speaking, I want you to be thinking about what are the language, what types of language, what type of grammar do you think Alex is trying to recycle so students hear the language used in an authentic way? Okay, so that's your listening task. All right, here we go. We're going to watch the video. I'm just pausing it a second. Has everybody got sound?
No.
Neither have I. Why don't we have sound?
Give me one moment. I will stop sharing and reshare and see if that helps.
Nice joke, Amir. The silent method. I like it. Yeah. Lewis, if you try playing it, let's see what happens.
And a great tip from Diana to remember to tick the box that says, there it is.
When you grow up, you make mistakes and get hurt. You touch a hot stove and you burn your hand. You learn to check if the stove is hot before touching it again. Using the internet is the same, I think. My generation grew up with social media. I mean, really grew up. I've learned so many lessons using the internet for the last 25 years. The first time I joined a messaging app, I was so excited to talk to friends. But it was different from using a phone. We could talk to multiple friends at the same time. And I did some embarrassing things. I can't believe I used to do this. There was this thing called an away message. When we were going to be away from the computer, we could leave away messages for our friends so they would know we were busy. Well, I was childish. Dumb. I would leave away messages that were actually secret messages to my crush, hoping she would read them. For example, I'd leave song lyrics about a brown-haired girl, hoping my crush would realize it was about her. If I could talk to my younger self, I'd tell me to never, ever do that. Everyone could read that away message, my classmates, my best friends, my little brother, everyone. I probably looked so pathetic. Lesson number 1, when you put something on the internet, everyone can see it. The first year I went to university, a new social networking site opened up. Only college students could join it. We'd go to parties and post pictures. There were some photos that were beyond cringeworthy. What was I thinking? A few years later, everyone could join it, including my mom, and she found me. If I'd known that my mom would send me a friend request, I wouldn't have told her about my account. But it's my mom. I had to accept the friend request. And of course, she could see every single embarrassing picture I posted from my college days. Lesson number 2, don't post anything online that you wouldn't want your mother to see. In 2009, I started posting videos online. They were fun videos. I had just moved to South Korea, and there were so many things I wanted to show my friends and family. It is such a cool country. The food, the people, everything about it. And there were some embarrassing videos for sure, but when I look back at those videos, do you know my biggest regret? I didn't take more pictures and videos. I wish I'd known how precious those memories would become. I should have taken more pictures and videos, especially with those friends who are no longer in my life. Lesson number 3, take lots of pictures and videos, but don't post all of them. As embarrassing as these internet life lessons are.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there. You've seen the bulk of it. You guys are very good. I saw all the grammar coming up. You started saying past tenses, which was true. There was past tenses at the beginning. And then as it progressed, we started to get into some conditional language. And then you started to pick up the fact that he was using a bit of third conditional, but a lot of it was sort of past conditionals. So we had structures like, I wish I'd known. He had the quote about his mother, he wouldn't have put something online. So what we got from Alex was this kind of very real world description of regrets and giving advice. So what you get in the unit is you get the vocabulary related to the topic of using the internet and things that we regret doing on the internet. Most of us have done something on the internet that we regret at some point. And then he starts to use and recycle some of the grammar from the unit. So when you're watching these Global Voices videos, what you'll notice is that you're getting a very visual demonstration of the language, but in a real context. And then what's cool about it is that students have watched it, and then afterwards, naturally, they can start talking about the things that they maybe regret doing, or they can give advice to people about what they should or shouldn't do when they're using the internet. So the videos are setting up a very real reason for using English in a particular way. And this is what's great about the Global Voices videos. And it brings the videos really up to date now in the 4th edition, but it makes them very accessible for students to talk about real world things and also kind of hear the language they've been learning used in an authentic way. Rasha, your question about the full video length is about, they're normally about 3 to 4 minutes. 1 or 2 of them longer at higher levels, but normally the interviews are 3 to 4 minutes. At lower levels, quite often they might be that length, but somebody will speak for a little while and then there'll be something visual and then they'll speak again. So they kind of get a break while they're listening in the videos. But quite a few of the videos, yes, also have interesting video footage, for example, from different cities around the world and so on. The name of the speaker was Alex Seacrest. Okay, so that's the Global Voices video. That's the video package. 2 videos per unit. One as the warm-up, and then one with a lot more language in the Global Voices video at the end. So we're really pleased with the video content in the new WorldLink 4th edition. Final new feature is the Real World Link section. Some of the interesting feedback we got from teachers was, can't we have moments when students do project work or they're given choices? And we were interested in this area because of course books, normally you turn the page, you do the exercises in class, and then maybe you set some homework. And yet we all know that project work is fantastic for students' higher order thinking, because when students work on projects, they have an element of choice, they have to manage the situation, they have to use their critical thinking and their creativity. So we thought, how can we bring this into the book and take advantage of that? So what we've done is introduce the Real World Link pages. Now these come after every 3 units. They're 2 pages, and usually there's some kind of text. There might be a listening, there might be a reading text, there might be something visual, but something to get students talking. So on this page, students are looking at the results from a survey into future cities and what young people want to see in their future cities. What do they expect from city life in the future? So it's the type of student you would expect to be using the book, is taking part in this survey. Students look at the result, and a lot of the language in this text about future cities was presented in the previous 3 units. So it's recycling, it's revising. And then, of course, it makes sense that students have a go at creating their own survey. But rather than normally in course books, we give them one instruction and say, go off and write a survey. What we've done with the real world link section is give students 3 choices. So on this spread, for example, the first option is they can make copies of the question. So they write a survey, they write the survey onto paper and hand out the survey to everyone in class. Option 2, they could put it online. So if you were teaching online, you could suggest that students use a tool like SurveyMonkey or something like that, or Google Forms to do the survey online and ask their classmates to fill it out for homework. So you're doing the whole thing as an online lesson. Or 3, students could work in pairs, they could interview each other, then they could interview another person, and then they could write down their answers. And obviously they gather all that information and then they present the data about the class. The point of this is by giving you 3 options, you could decide as a teacher which is the best option to suit my classroom situation. Or you could say to students, you choose, you take charge, you choose which option. Or you could say to students, okay, group A, can you do option 1? Group B, can you do option 2? Group C, do option 3. So the students are doing different choices and then they all present their findings at the end. So you get quite different ways of approaching the work, which imagine how engaging or much more motivating that would be than just giving them one instruction and telling them to do it one way. I've given you this example because this obviously lends itself to online teaching. You could easily do this lesson as an online class. Thank you, Rasha. The word is differentiated. That's what I was looking for. It's differentiated. You could give them this because it's online, but there are other projects, for example, where students are asked to go outside and find things. We've got projects in other real world links where they make their own video content or they take photographs. So it's a real opportunity to let your students play with English and be creative and use that higher order thinking. And you might get to it after a unit and think, well, we're not ready to do it yet. So you don't always have to do it in order. You could do it in different stages of the course if you wanted to. It's just that it's designed to recycle and revise a lot of the language that's come up in the units. I think you can have a lot of fun with the real world links. It's an opportunity to break up the usual routines of your lesson and say to students, okay, and also remember with project work, it's not something you necessarily just do in one lesson. You might start a real world link in one lesson, set part of it for homework, and then do the next part in a lesson maybe a week later. So there's different ways of structuring it. There's different flexibility. As I say, you can play around with it and have some fun, and I think your students will too. So let's just sum up those real world link sections. So the aim is to recycle and review the language goals from the 3 previous units. They feature project-based tasks, so it's project work, good for higher order thinking. And they offer choices as well. They give the students that opportunity in lessons. Quite often students don't get that chance to make the decision or choose what they're going to do in their lessons. So I think that's a really exciting feature of the WorldLink part of the book. Okay, I'm going to hand over now to Lewis, who's just going to take you through the final part of the presentation before the Q&A.
Thank you so much, John. Some really exciting features there. The Global Voices is such an exciting feature that we just can't wait to share with everyone. Just to give you a little bit more information about the speakers in there, John mentioned that we have this variety, National Geographic explorers, we have students, English students, and we have interviews on the streets that we've shot all over the world. What's really exciting about the Global Voices is that not all of our speakers are native English speakers. And I think that really speaks a lot to what John mentioned in terms of the variety of Englishes, the global Englishes. We have a lot of non-native English speakers, whether they be National Geographic explorers, whether they be those people on the street or the students that John mentioned. And what we're also really excited about with the Global Voices is that we have a nice balance of ages, of the younger explorers and the older explorers, as well as a nice balance in the genders. I think for a long time, National Geographic explorers were considered to be these older white gentlemen, and that's not the case. And I think we've really embraced the ethos of the society and brought you a nice variety of people who are really excelling in their field in a variety of different areas. So at this point, I'd just like to circle back to our research and development that we explored early on in the session. You may remember me saying that we keep in touch with our survey respondents and panelists. And we recently did this for WorldLink for the 4th edition. And here are some quotes that we received in response to those areas that we targeted in this new edition. So with respect to the signposting of language goals, one reviewer said self-assessment is often more accurate than formal assessment, and students feel comfortable with it. Having the goals and self-check after every lesson is very useful. Another reviewer told us with respect to the Global Voices video, when my students were able to understand that last video, they felt that they accomplished something, like they really learned something. And another reviewer told us that they would use the Global Voices section, the Global Voices video, as an informal assessment. I think that speaks volumes of the potential of the Global Voices video. Finally, with respect to the Real World Link review sections, another reviewer said, I'm happy to see that review sections will include ways to practice out of class and wants us to teach strategies on how to be more efficient in English. So we're really pleased to see that the updates we made have been well received. But go away and take a look for yourself. We're so excited to share this new edition with you, and we hope you really enjoy using it with your learners. So that's your lot for this session. And I think at this point, we can open it up for questions.
Hi, fellas. This is Caitlin Thomas, your colleague at National Geographic Learning here. I loved a question from Rasha in the chat here that I'd like to repeat for you. Have you thought of assessment before planning as you approach a backward design approach? Thought this was a really nice question, and I'll leave it to the experts to answer.
I'm guessing, Rasha, you're referring here to the idea of setting the goal and then backward planning from the goal. So you say, what are the goals we're trying to achieve over these series of pages within this lesson? And then you're working your way back. And I think naturally when you decide what the goals are, part of planning the lessons that lead to those goals, part of that includes thinking about assessment. How will students demonstrate whether they've achieved those goals or not, and how will I assess it? And there's different ways in which we can do that in the book. For example, the Active English page, I can't show you this, but if you pick up the teacher's book, what we call the lesson planner, on the Active English teacher's notes, there's always a feature called diagnostics, which sounds a bit medical, but actually what we mean is that it gives you tips on what to listen out for as a teacher when students are doing the Active English. So with the board game that I showed you, if you picked up the teacher's notes would suggest while students are playing the game, listen for these particular features, and it's drawing the teacher's attention to what they need to be assessing, so what they need to give formative assessment on. You could also choose to give summative assessment using the tests that go with WorldLink. And then what you're doing is you're saying to the students at the end, now you use those tick box I showed you and self-assess yourself. And it's a really valuable to be able to see how the students self-assess themselves and what you're actually hearing, because you can have a student who makes errors and so on, but if there are students who's aware of those errors and they can self-assess, then the likelihood is that student's going to be able to do something about it themselves, and they're going to be very motivated to do it. If they're not assessing themselves correctly, then clearly as a teacher, you've got to take some action and help that students and guide them towards improvement. So when you're planning goals and doing backward planning, like I'm talking about, you're thinking about assessment as well. The assessment naturally comes along because you've got to think of ways to assess based on the content that you're hoping the students will be recycling and reusing on the Active English page. I hope that is getting what you're asking about.
Thanks, John. I'm going to read a question that just came over in the Q&A box from Sergio, which is a great one. Does WorldLink have a placement test? And yes, indeed it does. It has a brand new placement test called the National Geographic Learning Online Placement Test. And it will be live in June of 2021. And right now we're undergoing a user testing phase, working with learners from around the world to validate, making sure we're delivering a fair and reliable test. Along with our placement test, we will provide a validation report that talks about the content and the functionality of this fair and valid test. And it will feature what we believe to be very important in this assessment phase, which is real content. We will collect speaking samples as well as place learners into 14 levels using the listening, reading, and use of English, which will include grammar and vocabulary. Those 14 levels will be aligned to the CEFR. So please look forward to more information on that. That was probably, I could have probably answered that with a yes or no, huh, Sergio? All right, we'll go back to, let's see, Nellie.
Caitlin, I would like to field a question that came in early on in the presentation.
Great.
I believe it came in during the introduction. I believe Red Cookson, I hope I am pronouncing your name correctly, asked, can you give an example of how this spoken focus program hits all 4 forms of communication: spoken, written, listening, and reading? The answer is very straightforward. We simply provide more opportunities. You know, John showed you a walkthrough of one of the lessons, and within that lesson, we have a dedicated speaking section. But within the other strands, we have students discuss the content on the page through a wide variety of group interactions. And then at the end of each lesson, the Active English section usually involves some form of larger or extensive interaction that students then can report back to the class and work on as a larger group. And finally, the Global Voices section has students respond to the video content by using the same language as the speakers. And this has really become the jewel in the crown, because while they are challenging, you know, students are able to use the same language as the speakers. And finally, the real world link, as John mentioned, it provides opportunities for this freer speaking, you know, even opportunities for incidental language learning, because these interactions that students are having during these project-based tasks, they're not necessarily controlled by the curriculum within the book. You know, students are engaging in free speaking and really maximizing those opportunities to practice English.
Thanks, Lewis. I think it's possibly also worth adding, I mean, for people who have questions about areas like writing, also slightly different in the 4th edition now, writing is featured more strongly at the end of lesson B. So even within the Active English and the speaking activities, there is focus on students have a writing task, and they also have reference to model versions of the text in the back of the book. And any teachers who are dealing with the issue of mediation now in CFR levels, I know some teachers out there have got to deal with the issue of mediation. the book takes that into account in terms of a lot of the speaking activities are connected with working with a reading text, responding to a listening text, or producing something written alongside something spoken. So we're very conscious of that now in the production of all books, I would say, but particularly in WorldLink, where we've really kind of made the writing feature slightly stronger at the end of lesson B. And again, the writing is recycling all the vocabulary that's come up through the unit. Francia's just asked a question about scope and sequence. The scope and sequence, well, maybe Lewis is better qualified to answer. In the book, I worked on level 2 and level 4. Well, level 4 is a brand new book. So when I was writing that, it's a B2 level. I had to take into account what is normally expected in terms of vocabulary, grammar, speaking skills at a B2 level. So that's a totally new scope and sequence. But in level 2, we didn't change the scope and sequence so much. We focused more on the feedback that we mentioned, which was the scope and sequence teachers in general seemed to like. They just wanted it more clearly stated through the can-do goals. Is that a fair comment, Lewis?
Yeah, I think it is. You know, I think on the whole, everyone was happy with the themes that we were touching upon. We just had to tighten some of those up between lessons A and lessons B. And it really gave us a chance to home in on those areas for improvement.
All right, fellas, I have another question from you from Jose. Has this material, does it have a lot of idioms, slangs, or common language, or is it very formal? So the type of language and how is that selected?
Yeah, so I can give some input on that. As John mentioned, all of our languages is graded. You know, when we align our programs to the Common European Framework, it's important for us to grade language. There are a number of tools available to be able to grade your language that are based on corpora. Idioms, slang, you know, all of these things fit within that grading. And naturally, providing more opportunities for providing more speaking opportunities for students means that these things are included, and they will naturally occur as well.
I think one of the fantastic things nowadays with course books, and particularly National Geographic, the way it uses video content, from the point of view of a writer, it's fantastic because I can control the language and grade it when I'm writing exercises or presenting new language. But when it comes to video and the Global Voices video, I only have a certain amount of control over the language that gets used. And the whole point of, say, the Global Voices video is that you're getting authentic responses. Yes, you're talking to speakers and you're expecting them to use the language you've presented in the unit, but they are going to use their own language as well. That's the whole point, that it's authentic, it's personalized. So inevitably new expressions come up, and they might be what you might call American English, there might be British English, there might be Australian English, but they also might be from somebody in Peru who's using English as their second language, and they use their own expression. So you kind of get, it's very rich when you start getting involved with the video content, and that's a slightly different issue. So that includes a lot more kind of idiomatic use of language. And it's not necessarily formal or informal. It's authentic. And I think it's challenging for students, but we've got to expose students to all the different international Englishes out there. And so that's a really rich part of the course, I think.
Yeah, it's truly a global product, and you know, there's no one focus on British English, even though the series is developed for the American English market. You know, we truly are a global product, and John was speaking to the video there, which really does encompass the whole world.
Any more questions, Caitlin?
I believe we have them covered right now. There's a question on pacing, which I'm going to answer. Zara, I'll answer that in the chat. But some folks have answered, so maybe worth mentioning. There's about 60 to 90 instructional hours per level, and we do have pacing